Hello again, everybody, and welcome to sort of our last lecture for the entire semester. I'm saying sort of because it's not the typical lectures that we've had that usually have a ton of information in them, that are kind of overarching ideas that relate to research you'd conduct anywhere. But what we're going to be doing in this much more condensed lecture today is looking at some things that specifically relates to your time here at Cal State East Bay, and in particular your time as a researcher here at Cal State East Bay. Because lots of you, as you start working your way up, will need to kind of know the ins and outs of how to be a researcher, not just anywhere, but here through the system, and so you can kind of make sure that you're meeting a lot of the different guidelines that we talked about in our previous class when discussing the kind of critical elements of ethical research. So if you are kind of moving along on the path of an undergraduate degree, as I mentioned earlier in class, most of you will probably at some point need to start running a study for either a senior project or some capstone class that you'll be taking as you kind of progress along the way. And to run these particular studies, there's a lot of things that you need to consider. Right? We've talked about a number of kind of structural issues that pop up. We've talked about some statistical concerns that you have. And we also talked in our last class about some ethical guidelines that you need to make sure that you're following. And when we talk about how we vet whether or not you followed those ethical guidelines, we just very briefly in our last class mentioned these things called IRBs, or Institutional Review Boards. Well, like any other four-year college, Cal State East Bay does have an institutional review board, and being familiar with what that institutional review board is and some of the things that they would require from you if you want to continue on with your research is something that I feel you really do want to know before leaving this class. So what is exactly an institutional review board? As I mentioned, institutional review boards are kind of the school's way of ensuring that you're following ethical guidelines not only set forth by the American Psychological Association, but the institution as a whole. In terms of who makes up the institutional review board, it's usually committees of either faculty members or research staff, but some schools, if they're large enough, do actually have entire departments that strictly handle reviewing research plans so they can make sure that we're following within the ethical guidelines at the school. For Cal State East Bay, the IRB that we have here is usually one that's kind of run primarily by faculty members and staff. And it's one that has occasional meetings so they can kind of just ensure that they're going over all the things that are being put their way in a relatively short period of time. If you do want to run studies, one of the things that you'll have to do is actually apply through the Institutional Review Board to be approved to run your research. And this is pretty much regardless of what type of research you're going to be conducting. So you could see what's out there and what would be required of you. I provided a link to the Institutional Review Board at Cal State East Bay, forewarning you that this link might not work anymore simply because we are working on a lot of different things on the Cal State East Bay campus website right now. And I'm a little worried as I'm looking at this that one might not work. But if you look up Cal State East Bay's IRB, you should get a quick link to that review board, and it'll give you an overview of what they're actually doing, who's in it, how often they meet, and it'll also, again, give you some forms and policies that you'll need to fill out if you do decide to run studies at some point in your career here. In terms of what these institutional review boards are looking for, they usually are looking for all the details of what your study's about. Essentially, they're looking through that list of APA mandated requirements and some additional ones that Cal State East Bay is asking. But in addition to this, another thing that almost all IRBs are looking for is to kind of ensure that you're doing your research in an ethical way, that you have some sort of training. Now, IRBs themselves don't often provide the training for individuals to ensure that they're being ethical with their research. It's all very time consuming and sometimes difficult to tackle thing. So most schools, like Cal State East Bay, kind of outsource this training. And there's a number of different ones that are out there. One of the ones that's kind of popular throughout the entire United States is something called the National Institute of Health training classes. There's also HIPAA classes if you're getting into medicine. But the one that Cal State East Bay uses, and a decent number of other schools actually use as well, is something called the CITI training program, which is the Collaborative Institutional Training Initiative. CITI is something that it can kind of be used for a whole variety of different things, but if you're getting into the social sciences, either with human research or animal research, they do have specific programs geared towards ensuring that you're being trained or at least informed properly about what you need to do as a researcher if you do want to pursue some topic in the social sciences, psychology in particular. After you've been certified through CITI or potentially NIH, you then have to, again, apply through these IRBs to be able to run your studies. And there's lots of different things that you have to be mindful of when you are filling out these applications. They need an exhaustive amount of information about what your study is going to be about, regardless of the nuances of your study. But there are things that put you in different categories for the IRBs when they review what it is that you're going to be doing. One of the questions that they ask is, are you running new research or are you using old data from a previous study that's already been vetted by the IRB? Are you running what's called exempt research, where you're not impacting the individuals, they're just kind of being observed? This is something we talked about before with the observational studies. Some observational studies are considered exempt research, where you're not looking at a sensitive group, you're not interacting with them, and there's no way of kind of linking your observations with people. That would be exempt research. Or is it what's called non-exempt research, where there's either sensitive groups or people that can be traced back to their responses, or some type of deception or inducement that might require a little bit extra look at the research. In all reality, most institutes nowadays just consider all research non-exempt unless there is some really unusual reason for why that study would qualify as exempt. That doesn't mean that non-exempt research is necessarily problematic. It's just there's a little bit more scrutiny when people are reviewing that research, just to ensure that, again, people are meeting all the ethical guidelines and kind of institutional standards that have been set forth before the project gets started. In future classes, as I mentioned, you're going to be kind of doing lots of projects. You're going to be doing lots of different things that essentially should build off of what we've covered. But what I'd like to do for you, so you can start getting yourselves more prepared for those labs and being more familiar with those things, is not having us spend hours overlooking the different IRBs that are out there and some of the things that they're looking for, but instead have you actually get yourself trained. So if you do actually go through an IRB at Cal State East Bay, you've already checked off one of the major boxes that's out there. And the major box that I want us to check off is this CITI training program that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to, into the next couple slides here, walk you through how to do this. Typically, this is when I close the slides down, so if you've got the slides printed off, you might notice there's no extra information on the PowerPoint slides that I provided you with. In this video, we're going to go through a couple extra things so you can see exactly what you're supposed to do to kind of access the CITI training program if you do want to do it. It's an extra credit option, it's not required, but we'll talk about the kind of point breakdown for this at the end of the video, and just kind of give you a sense of what's expected if you do opt to kind of pursue this extra credit opportunity. Another thing I should mention before we get into this, because I know some people might not want to pursue this CITI training thing, so they might be ending this video quickly, is you have to keep in mind that we have an exam coming up now. So on April 23rd, we have exam 2, and then we have the final exam coming up a couple weeks after that. So just be mindful of due dates for the extra credit activity and the exams, because it would be really catastrophic if you happen to miss one of these things simply because we've kind of transitioned to this online format. So good luck with this, everybody. And if you are interested in pursuing this CITI training stuff, Stick with me because we're going to walk through what to do for CITI training right now. All right, the first thing you need to do to get this CITI training is to actually register for the CITI program. Now, if some of you have done this in the past, that's great. You probably already have an account, but you probably haven't been properly trained with the programs that I want you to be trained with. So whether or not you have to register or not, you do want to go to this CITI program. If you've already registered, you can click on the login button and look up your name and information and see which programs you're going to need to complete. Essentially, you'll advance a couple slides forward so I can show you exactly which programs you need to complete. For the vast majority of you, though, that have never done this, sorry for my weird circling, but apparently my finger does not trace very well on a touch screen. What you want to do is go to the CITI program website that you see highlighted or circled, I guess, in the upper left-hand corner. When you go to that website, you're then going to click on the tab that's circled on the right side that says register. I'll give you a couple seconds to type this in. Pause me if you can, just so you can make sure that you get the correct URL. And then after you've clicked on the register tab, you can move on to the next slide. All right, so in the next step, oddly enough, even though you've already clicked on the register tab the first time, the next thing you need to do is click on another register tab on the next page. And that will bring you to an option to log in through your school. So just click on that register tab. And then after that, what you need to do is follow the CITI Learner registration steps. The first step asks you to link up to your organization. So you're going to type in California State University, East Bay. Usually if you type in the word California State, it's one of the top ones that comes up. And then you're going to agree to the terms and services and privacy policy on this site. If you're worried about the terms of service and privacy policy, I encourage you to click on those links just so you can review them. There's nothing super surprising there, but I don't want you to click on something that you don't want to click on without being informed, so do feel free to do that. But once you've registered for California State East Bay University and clicked on the agreeing of the terms of services, you will then click forward and get to the next step. So steps 2, 3, and 4 are essentially steps that are asking you to provide personal information about yourself. I can't tell you what your email address is, what your first and last name is, what your phone number is, but if you want to enter that stuff in, which I encourage you to do, some of it's required, do so. And then once you get to step 5, you've advanced through steps 2, 3, and 4, provided that personal information. This is where the specifics for this class are really important to take note of. The first thing that's important to note is that you are not taking this particular class for continuing education credits. Continuing education credits, for those of you that want to know, are credits that are offered to people once they've earned, usually it's some type of post-baccalaureate degree. So you've either earned a master's degree, a PhD, a PsyD, an MD, and you're required to take a certain number of classes every couple of years to just make sure that you're updated on things and that you're keeping up to speed with advancements in the field. None of you are at that point. None of you are taking this as a graduate level course or beyond, so this is not a continuing education class for any of you. So you should click on the no box here on that step 5. It's the first question that you're going to see that kind of seems odd. When you advance to step 6, this is the next thing that requires some very specific information. If you want to provide some of the information above, feel free to do so. Notice that it's not required, but you might want it, I don't know, just because. But when you go down to the bottom of step 6, it'll ask which course do you plan to take. The one you want to click on is what's called the Basic Human Subjects Social and Behavioral Focus class. Now, this isn't the only class that you're going to take, but by clicking on this one and then going to step 7, it puts you into a system that lets you check the right boxes so you can take the right classes. So make sure you scroll down to the Basic Human Subjects Social and Behavioral Focus when you're on step 6. And that will ensure that the next page gets you to the right spot. In step 7, you got a lot of different things that you're going to be clicking on. The first thing you want to do on the first two questions is select the social and behavioral research box for questions 1 and 2. It's kind of redundant to that question 2 since you're not taking a refresher course unless you need to. If you did actually already take this before, you might click on the refresher course, but I need to see approval that you've already done the IRB Human Subjects Research Basic course in the past. So for pretty much all of it, you're just going to click on the Social and Behavioral Research tab for both questions 1 and 2. As you scroll down, you're going to have to click on 2 other boxes, well, a couple different boxes, but one in particular that's unique is that's called the Animal Welfare Basic Course, the IACUC. Now, I know many of you probably are not intending to do research with animals, but just so you can get more information about what it means to be a proper researcher with animals, this is your other option for extra credit. If you click on this one, the Animal Welfare Research box, that will give you a chance to actually do a kind of second CITI training approval. So you've got the human subjects one, and you've got the animal research one, or animal welfare basic course one, that you can click on for credit. The responsible conduct ones, you don't need to necessarily click on. I think just not needing supplementary material is big. I think they actually make you pay for some of those, so be mindful of not clicking on those other ones. And then as you progress down to questions 5, 6, and 7, it's asking more specific things like, are you involved in IRB, which you're not. You're not an IRB member, hopefully. You're not in any committees that I don't know of. You're not exporting compliance through other technologies. You're also not a research administrator. So you're going to click on no for those things. And that'll allow you to get to the final step. And this is once you're registered, you're actually taking the classes. So when you have yourself officially registered, what you should see, make sure you save your password and email address so you can log in again in the future, because it's tough to do all this in one setting, is 2 different courses that are available to you. The first one is listed as investigator, staff, and students, the basic course, and this is one of the ones that you're going to need to complete to get those 2 extra credit points that I mentioned. I think I mentioned earlier, maybe I didn't, to get 2 extra credit points. The other one that you have to complete is the Social and Behavioral Research Basic/Refresher course. If you've clicked on all the tabs that we talked about earlier, these are the 2 things that you should see. And you should notice, if you look here, that to complete these 2 different courses, you have to complete a number of different modules. The first one requires you to complete 9 modules. The second one requires you to complete 14 modules. At the end of these courses, if you've completed all the modules correctly, you'll get a certificate. What I need for you in the assignment tab where this is located is for you to actually upload those certificates. So show me that you've completed them by uploading 1 or 2 of them. If you get both of them done, you'll get 2 extra credit points per one that you've completed, so a total of 4 extra credit points. If you complete just one of them, I'll award you 2 extra credit points. That might seem like a lot, but that's actually 4 points is 2% of your grade. So that can definitely be a little boost for your grade at the very end of the semester if you're right on the cusp of a higher grade. So I encourage you to not only do this because it's really helpful for future trainings and the possibility of getting into labs, but doing this because it can help you a little bit out if you are right on the cusp of a higher grade and you're looking for that little boost that you maybe need going into the last exam and the last final. That's going to be it for now. I guess this just kind of reiterates what I said. Make sure you send me those certificates. Well, don't send me them, but upload those certificates in the appropriate places. And remember that you'll get 2 extra credit points per course that you complete. There is a due date set for this, so make sure you're mindful of that due date. It's listed in the assignments and it's listed on the syllabus. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to any of you that it is due a very specific time and date. I don't actually have it on the top of my head right now, so I don't want to tell you the wrong information. But it's due roughly like a week, I think, after the second exam. So just try to get working on this as fast as you can. Make sure you're studying away for the second exam, which is coming up very soon. And I wish you all the best. I guess the last time you'll probably hear my voice. So I guess in my last sign out, make sure you're taking care of yourself. Make sure you're doing well. And I wish you all the best. Bye.